It began with an email, a simple, digital message that would ripple through Hollywood like a shockwave. Imagine being a global celebrity, born into royalty, adored by millions, walking on red carpets, gracing magazine covers, and yet, in one instant, facing the cold, unfiltered reality of the entertainment industry. That was Meghan Markle, former Duchess of Sussex, sending a message that nobody expected. But what she typed, what she dared to ask, would set off a series of events that insiders are still talking about, whispering about in closed offices, and some even admit, laughing about behind her back. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The audacity of it. Meghan Markle, the woman who once walked the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, asking to be the next James Bond. Can you picture it? A royal request infiltrating the inner sanctum of Hollywood powerhouses. She had a dream, a vision, a goal to leap from one kind of iconic status to another. And in theory, it makes sense. Hollywood loves royalty, the Bond franchise loves attention, and Meghan herself has charisma, elegance, and a public profile that could rival almost anyone in the industry. But theory and reality are often separated by a chasm deeper than the Mariana Trench. Because in Hollywood, nothing is free. Nothing is given based on fame, pedigree, or public adoration. Power is currency, and rejection is an art form. And Meghan was about to experience that reality firsthand. She wasn't just asking to audition for any role. She wasn't seeking a cameo or a supporting part. She wanted the lead. She wanted to step into the shoes of James Bond himself, a character etched into cinematic history, synonymous with charm, danger, and global recognition. And she sent her request directly to one of the most powerful figures in modern Hollywood, Amy Pascal. Amy Pascal. If her name doesn't immediately strike recognition, let me make it clear. This is the woman who helped shape the careers of countless A-list actors, controlled decisions at Sony and MGM studios, and has the ability to make or break careers with a single memo, a single phone call, or yes, even a single email reply. She is not someone who takes requests lightly. And she is certainly not someone inclined to humor celebrity fantasies, no matter how high-profile or glamorous the sender. Amy Pascal is a force, and in this story, she would become the gatekeeper between Meghan's dreams and the stark reality of Hollywood ambition. So what did Meghan write? What tone did she take? How did she phrase a request so bold it would make headlines if it leaked? We can piece together the essence from insiders. It was confident, assertive, polished. Perhaps too polished. There's a difference between confidence and audacity, and Meghan skirted the line in a way that only a royal could. She was polite, professional, but underneath, there was ambition, desire, a hunger to be more than a public figure. She wanted to transition from princess to icon, from headline to legend. And that ambition, however admirable, was about to collide with one of Hollywood's harshest realities. When Amy Pascal read that email, sources say her initial reaction was a mixture of disbelief and amusement. But amusement quickly turned into incredulity. Because Hollywood, despite its glamour, does not operate on wishful thinking. The idea of Meghan Markle as James Bond was unusual, to say the least. Not impossible, not completely out of reach, but unprecedented. And in Hollywood, unprecedented can be terrifying. It can be revolutionary, or it can be laughed out of existence. And Amy Pascal? She did not hold back. There's an unspoken truth in the film industry. Ambition without grounding is often met with harsh rejection. The emails that pass between studios, producers, and actors are private, but when they leak, or when insiders recount them, the public is left with a tantalizing glimpse into the reality of entertainment power. Meghan's email, we're told, was polite but pointed. It conveyed a deep understanding of the Bond legacy, a promise of commitment, a subtle suggestion that she could bring fresh energy to a franchise that thrives on novelty. And yet, it underestimated Hollywood's devotion to experience, to history, and to the unspoken hierarchy that governs who gets cast and who doesn't. Hollywood insiders who have spoken on the record, or off the record, in hushed tones, say Amy Pascal's response was brief, sharp, and unmistakably final. It was a rejection so clear, so cutting, that it reverberated through the corridors of MGM, Sony, and the broader film industry. Some even described it as merciless in its clarity, a phrase that might sound dramatic but is entirely accurate when you consider what was at stake. For Meghan, this wasn't just another audition. It was a statement about her aspirations, her relevance, her ability to compete with some of the most legendary actors in the world. And to have it dismissed in a single reply, that's a moment few can forget. But here's the twist. Hollywood is not just about rejection. It's about power, politics, and the subtle wars waged behind closed doors. That single email opened a door to speculation, gossip, and controversy that continues to swirl today. Insiders are talking about the tone, the content, and the implications of that email. They're analyzing Pascal's motivations, her possible intentions, and the long-term effects on Meghan's career trajectory. And for the audience, for viewers like you, it raises a question that's impossible to ignore. Was this simply a polite, professional rejection, or was there something more calculated behind it? Something intended to send a message not just to Meghan Markle, but to anyone who might overstep Hollywood's unspoken rules? Consider the stakes. James Bond is not just a movie role. It's a symbol, a global icon, a franchise that carries weight far beyond the box office. Every casting decision is scrutinized, dissected, and debated endlessly by fans, critics, and insiders alike. To even suggest that a newcomer, however famous in a different sphere, could step into that role is daring. And yet Meghan did it. She made the ask. She believed, at least to some extent, that her star power, her global influence, and her public persona could sway Hollywood in her favor. And in one sense, that audacity is admirable. But audacity is also risky, especially when you underestimate the gatekeepers. Amy Pascal's response, according to sources, was succinct and undeniably sharp. It conveyed what Hollywood often communicates in subtle but unmistakable ways. You are not the right fit. Not now. Not like this. The wording, the tone, the implied reasoning. It was all there, hidden between the lines, accessible only to those trained in reading Hollywood's coded language. Meghan had stepped into a world where rejection is often sugar-coated for the public, but understood fully by the insiders. And Pascal delivered the message without sugar. It was blunt, precise, and memorable. So what happened next? How did Meghan react? Did she push back? Did she seek allies, try to charm her way back into the conversation, or pivot to another project? These are the questions that kept Hollywood buzzing. Sources suggest that the rejection triggered a series of strategic recalibrations. Meetings were scheduled, advisors were consulted, and behind-the-scenes moves were made to reposition Meghan's ambitions without further jeopardizing her credibility. And yet, despite all this, the email itself has taken on a life of its own. In an industry obsessed with gossip, scandal, and exclusivity, this single exchange became a story that insiders continue to retell with astonishment. And here's what makes this story resonate beyond Hollywood. It's about ambition, audacity, and the reality check that sometimes follows bold moves. Meghan Markle, a figure who has navigated public scrutiny, international media, and royal expectations, faced a challenge unlike any she had encountered before. And the lesson is universal. No matter how powerful you are, no matter how admired, the world can still say no, and it can say it in ways that leave a lasting impact. But what comes next is where the story truly escalates. Because Meghan's email, Pascal's reply, and the ripple effects throughout Hollywood did more than just reject an actress. It revealed hidden dynamics, unspoken rivalries, and a glimpse into the ruthless world of movie making where even the most famous names must play by the rules. It's a story of ambition meeting gatekeeping, confidence meeting cold reality, and a reminder that in Hollywood, power is both given and fiercely protected. And just when you think this is the end of the drama, that the email is the climax, insiders hint at something even more shocking. A revelation that could reshape not only Meghan's career, but also the narrative around Hollywood, royalty, and ambition. Something that connects back to Amy Pascal's influence, the Bond franchise, and an industry that thrives on controlling the narrative. It all started with a bold decision. Some decisions change your life quietly. Others announce themselves like a flash of lightning. Unignorable, shocking, impossible to ignore. For Meghan Markle, Leaving the royal family wasn't just a personal choice. It was the opening move of a larger, calculated plan. She stepped away from centuries of protocol, from a life scripted by tradition, and into a world defined by ambition, reinvention, and yes, opportunity. But while walking away from royalty might seem like freedom, it is also the beginning of a new kind of scrutiny, a more intense kind of spotlight, Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight. Hollywood does not reward lineage. It does not bend to the wishes of fame acquired through family history or public image. It respects only one thing: performance, influence, and the ability to navigate the labyrinth of power without tripping over yourself. Meghan understood some of this instinctively. She had acted before, she had experience on screen, and she had charisma that transcended borders. But ambition is rarely enough when you are stepping into a universe that measures value in contracts, relationships, and whispered reputations. And yet, she didn't hesitate. She sent an email that would shock even the most hardened studio executives, a request to become the next James Bond. Think about that for a moment. James Bond, the icon, the legend. A franchise that has existed since the 1960s, one that has survived decades of cultural shifts, scandals, and evolving tastes. Bond is more than a role. It's a symbol, a carefully crafted persona that carries a mix of danger, charm, and power. And here comes Meghan Markle, a figure whose experience is largely in television and celebrity diplomacy, asking to step directly into that role. It's audacious. Some might even say reckless. But ambition often walks hand in hand with audacity. And Meghan's journey is a study in both. Her move wasn't just a whimsical fantasy. It was strategic. After stepping away from royal duties, Meghan needed relevance. She needed influence. Hollywood is a world where relevance is currency, and without it, even the most famous faces fade quickly. By positioning herself as a potential Bond, she wasn't just chasing a movie role. She was asserting that she could redefine global cultural narratives, that she could command attention on her own terms, and that she could compete with actors whose careers were built over decades. But ambition often meets reality with a brutal slap. Hollywood insiders whisper about the audacity of Meghan's request, describing it as both shocking and fascinating. Imagine the internal conversations at MGM. Executives leaning back in their chairs, reading the email, exchanging glances, and silently questioning whether this was genius, naivety, or a combination of both. Meghan was entering a world that thrives on subtle power plays and invisible hierarchies. In Hollywood, a bold move like this is like stepping into a lion's den wearing a crown. Impressive, yes, but extremely risky. What makes this even more intriguing is Meghan's background. She was not a stranger to public scrutiny. She had spent years under the glare of international media attention, navigating everything from tabloid rumors to global fan adoration. She understood optics, performance, and storytelling. Yet, despite this experience, some insiders say she underestimated one critical factor: Hollywood's unspoken rules. Here, pedigree counts far less than experience, reputation, and connections. The email was a bold shot, but it was entering a territory where every word, every tone, and every implication is dissected with surgical precision. And make no mistake, Meghan's email was meticulously crafted. According to insiders, it was professional, polished, and persuasive. She highlighted her acting experience, her global recognition, and the unique perspective she could bring to the Bond franchise. She framed it not as a whim, but as a thoughtful proposal, emphasizing her understanding of the legacy, the audience, and the cultural significance of the role. This wasn't a casual ask. It was a carefully constructed pitch designed to appeal to power, influence, and creative ambition. Yet, ambition alone does not guarantee acceptance. In Hollywood, timing is everything. Relationships are everything. Influence is everything. And Meghan, for all her star power and royal pedigree, was an outsider in a world built on insider networks and unwritten rules. Some executives reportedly viewed the email as audacious, even amusing. Others considered it a test, wondering whether Meghan truly understood what it meant to step into a role as iconic as James Bond. And a few saw it as a potential threat, a reminder that fame and influence can suddenly arrive at your doorstep, uninvited and challenging established hierarchies. It's worth reflecting on what this says about Meghan herself. Few people in the world would dare to make a request of this magnitude. Few people would approach Amy Pascal, one of the most powerful figures in Hollywood, and make a case for themselves in a franchise that has strict, traditional casting norms. Some might call it arrogance, others might call it confidence. But the common thread is audacity. Meghan was making a statement. She would not be ignored. She would not be confined by past roles or expectations, and she would not let even the most influential figures stand in the way of her ambitions. And yet, the stakes were high. James Bond is not a role that can be given lightly. It's a brand, a symbol, a cultural touchstone. Every casting decision is scrutinized, dissected, and debated in ways most people cannot even imagine. To approach this franchise as an outsider is to invite criticism, speculation, and perhaps even ridicule. Meghan's email, therefore, was not merely a request. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that risked public humiliation if it failed, or potential transformation if it succeeded. Insiders suggest that Meghan's strategy went beyond mere ambition. There was an understanding that visibility is power, and that by making this move, she could shape the narrative around her post-royal identity. Hollywood thrives on spectacle, and Meghan understood the attention her request would generate. She was not merely asking for a role. She was asserting relevance, reminding the world that she could step into new arenas with confidence, charisma, and strategic intent. But Hollywood does not always reward confidence. Often, it rewards experience, loyalty, and the ability to navigate complex networks of influence. This is where Meghan's bold move collided with reality. Amy Pascal, as a gatekeeper, holds tremendous sway over what happens within Sony and MGM. She has a reputation for being decisive, strategic, and occasionally ruthless. When she read Meghan's email, it reportedly sparked a mix of reactions: intrigue, surprise, and incredulity. Some executives found it daring, others found it audacious, even overreaching. Yet the audacity was only the beginning. The email was a catalyst, setting in motion a series of events that would ripple through Hollywood, the media, and Meghan's own team. It prompted conversations, speculation, and debate about what Meghan represented in this new chapter of her life. Could a former royal successfully navigate the treacherous waters of Hollywood and secure a role as monumental as James Bond? Or was this a cautionary tale in the making, a reminder that ambition alone cannot overcome industry gatekeepers and entrenched hierarchies? There's also the human element to consider. Meghan is not a stranger to rejection. Royals are trained to perform under scrutiny, to maintain composure, and to navigate public criticism with grace. But Hollywood rejection is different. It is often personal, public, and instantaneous. One moment you are a global icon. The next, you are reminded that influence is conditional, earned, and meticulously measured. The email, as audacious as it was, exposed Meghan to an environment where reputation and network often outweigh fame and visibility. And yet, in that moment, Meghan's bold Hollywood move demonstrated something profound. It revealed her willingness to take risks, to challenge norms, and to pursue ambition without apology. She was no longer a royal confined by protocol. She was a woman navigating an industry built on influence, power, and perception. Her email was a statement of intent, a declaration that she would not be sidelined, and a test of whether Hollywood's most powerful players would take her seriously. But even as she pressed send, few could predict what would happen next. The response from Amy Pascal would not merely be a polite decline. It would be a revelation, a turning point, and a moment that insiders describe as both shocking and defining. And that response, when it landed, would illuminate not only the realities of Hollywood ambition, but also the stark contrast between confidence and the harsh truth of industry gatekeeping. What makes this story irresistible, and what keeps Hollywood gossip mills buzzing, is that Meghan's email was only the first act. The real drama begins with the reply, a reply that insiders say was sharp, pointed, and unforgettable. It was a response that would test Meghan's resilience, challenge her ambitions, and force her to reconsider not only her path in Hollywood, but her approach to power, influence, and public perception. And just when you think the story might plateau, just when you expect a polite decline and a quiet retreat, The events that followed turned into a cascade of intrigue, speculation, and insider revelations. Emails were discussed, tones dissected, strategies debated, and Hollywood's whispers grew louder. The implications reached far beyond a single franchise. They touched on ambition, audacity, power, and the delicate balance between confidence and overreach. If you think Hollywood is glamorous, think again. The glitz, the red carpets, the flashing cameras, they're just the surface. Underneath lies a battlefield of influence, strategy, and ruthless decision-making. And at the heart of that battlefield sits Amy Pascal. To understand what happened with Meghan Markle's audacious James Bond request, you need to understand who Amy Pascal is and why her opinion matters more than most in Hollywood. Amy Pascal is not just a producer. She is a gatekeeper, a decision-maker, and a strategist with a reputation for shaping the careers of some of the world's biggest stars. She has shepherded blockbuster franchises, greenlit projects that have become cultural touchstones, and wielded the kind of influence that makes even seasoned actors pause before making a move. Pascal's journey to this level of influence is itself fascinating. She rose through the ranks at Sony Pictures, demonstrating a unique combination of business acumen, creative intuition, and political savvy. In an industry where gender, politics, and legacy often define who succeeds, she carved a space for herself at the top, a space few women have historically occupied. Her resume reads like a roadmap of Hollywood power. Spider-Man, The Social Network, Skyfall's distribution deals, and countless other high-profile projects that have defined modern cinema. She doesn't just produce movies, she shapes culture. And she does it with a mix of elegance, authority, and, at times, calculated ruthlessness. What makes Pascal particularly formidable is her dual understanding of art and commerce. She knows storytelling intimately, but she also understands the bottom line, market trends, and the subtleties of celebrity influence. This is not a person who hands out opportunities lightly. She evaluates risk, potential, and alignment with both brand and vision. When someone sends an email requesting the lead in one of the most iconic film franchises in history, she is not just reading a message. She is assessing the audacity, capability, and long-term implications. And that is precisely why Meghan Markle's email was so audacious. Pascal, by reputation and experience, is not easily impressed by fame alone. She has seen countless high-profile names attempt to leverage influence for roles, deals, or access. She understands that celebrity is only part of the equation. Talent, timing, industry relationships, and strategic fit matter just as much, if not more. So when Meghan's email arrived, Pascal's mind would have instantly gone into evaluation mode. She would have considered questions like, does she understand the franchise? Does she have the acting experience to carry this role? How would audiences respond? And, critically, does this move align with the long-term strategy of MGM and the Bond brand? Pascal is also known for her unfiltered honesty. Unlike executives who cushion rejection with diplomacy, Pascal has a reputation for bluntness, precision, and, at times, a biting sense of irony. Insiders describe her responses as sharp but clear, a rare combination in an industry known for vague, non-committal replies. If you make a request that doesn't meet her standards or align with her vision, she won't hesitate to say no. She doesn't mince words, and she doesn't let ego interfere with decision-making. That is a trait that commands respect, fear, and sometimes resentment. The context of Pascal's influence is critical here. In Hollywood, producers like her hold the keys to projects, budgets, casting decisions, and creative direction. They can make or break careers with a single signature. Actors, even established ones, tread carefully. A poorly timed request, a misaligned ambition, or a misjudged proposal can have consequences far beyond a single rejection. It can affect future opportunities, reputation, and perceived credibility. Meghan, despite her global profile, was stepping into this high-stakes environment. Amy Pascal's reputation for handling high-profile requests is legendary. She has managed talent with massive egos, navigated studio politics during billion-dollar franchise negotiations, and maintained her position at the top through decades of change. If Meghan wanted to understand how Hollywood really works, Pascal would be the perfect teacher. Though in this case, the lesson came not through mentorship, but through rejection. It's a reminder that ambition must be tempered with understanding the terrain you are entering. What makes Pascal fascinating is her combination of intellect, intuition, and strategic foresight. She sees patterns in Hollywood deals that most people miss. She understands not only what audiences want, but what executives will tolerate. She anticipates challenges, considers long-term implications, and acts decisively. That decisiveness is critical when someone like Meghan Markle enters the conversation with a proposal that could shift perceptions, media attention, and franchise dynamics. Pascal's influence is amplified by her understanding of the Bond franchise itself. James Bond is not just a film. It is a global institution with decades of legacy, tradition, and audience expectations. Casting decisions are closely guarded, analyzed, and debated extensively. The introduction of a high-profile outsider, especially one from a background as different as Meghan Markle's, requires careful consideration. Pascal, with her experience, would have immediately weighed the potential benefits against the risks. Could Meghan bring fresh energy to the franchise? Could she attract new audiences? Or would the move alienate core fans and disrupt the carefully curated legacy of Bond? The insider accounts suggest that Pascal's reaction was a blend of respect for the audacity and firm assessment of reality. She reportedly recognized Meghan's visibility, understanding that a global audience would be intrigued. At the same time, she understood that visibility alone is insufficient in Hollywood. Experience, training, and fit for the role are non-negotiable. Pascal's reply, according to sources, reflected both clarity and an unambiguous assessment of alignment. Pascal's power extends beyond casting. She shapes narratives. She controls access. She knows when to say yes, when to delay, and when to close doors. In the case of Meghan Markle, her reply wasn't just a rejection. It was a statement about boundaries, about understanding the franchise, and about the nature of opportunity in Hollywood. It was a lesson in how ambition intersects with reality, and how even the most high-profile individuals must navigate complex dynamics to succeed. Yet, Pascal is not simply a gatekeeper. She is also a storyteller, someone who understands audience perception, media influence, and the interplay between public image and private decision-making. Rejecting Meghan was not just about assessing talent. It was about maintaining the integrity of the franchise, managing internal studio politics, and sending a clear message about standards and expectations. Every move Pascal makes is calculated, with long-term implications in mind. Some might see this as cold or harsh. But in the world Pascal inhabits, clarity is a form of respect. Ambiguity, false hope, or soft rejections can create confusion, resentment, and wasted energy. Pascal's approach is direct: assess, respond, and maintain strategic control. And in this case, her email to Meghan Markle, brief as it may have been, carried the weight of decades of influence, authority, and insider knowledge. Amy Pascal is also known for navigating scandals and controversies with skill. Her career has seen highs and lows, public scrutiny, and intense media attention. She has maintained relevance, power, and influence through calculated decisions, strategic relationships, and an unflinching understanding of Hollywood's ecosystem. That skill set made her uniquely positioned to respond to Meghan's ambitious request, not with panic, not with superficial politeness, but with the clear, concise, and strategic response that insiders describe. And this is where the tension escalates. Meghan, confident in her global profile and public admiration, may have expected consideration, intrigue, or at least curiosity. What she received instead, through Pascal's carefully worded reply, was a reminder of Hollywood's rules. Fame is not power. Visibility is not leverage. Ambition is not enough. And even royalty, glamorous and influential, must respect the hierarchy of the entertainment industry if they wish to thrive. Insiders describe the ripple effect of Pascal's reply as immediate. Executives began discussing the implications, studio heads debated the tone, and casting directors quietly assessed the potential fallout. What might have seemed like a simple rejection became a moment of reflection for Hollywood insiders, a reminder that ambition, no matter how high-profile, encounters gatekeepers who protect the legacy, the brand, and the industry's standards. Pascal's response, according to insiders, was brief, precise, and unmistakable in its message. Not now. Not in this way. Not aligned. And in that sentence, or paragraph, she conveyed decades of experience, an unshakable understanding of the industry, and a reminder that no amount of fame could substitute for fit, timing, and strategy. It was, in every sense, a masterclass in Hollywood decision-making. But here's the most fascinating aspect. Pascal's email did more than reject a proposal. It sparked intrigue, speculation, and ongoing discussion among insiders. It raised questions about ambition, celebrity influence, and the ways in which outsiders attempt to navigate entrenched power structures. It became a story in itself, a story that would ripple beyond the initial rejection, shaping narratives, media coverage, and Hollywood gossip for months to come. And just when you think the story might plateau with a polite decline, the implications of Pascal's response reveal themselves in unexpected ways. Meghan Markle, a woman who had navigated global media attention, international politics, and royal scrutiny, was confronted with a kind of rejection that is uniquely Hollywood, precise, calculated, and carrying consequences far beyond the initial interaction. Emails are usually mundane. They're brief, functional, and often forgotten within hours. But sometimes, an email carries the weight of ambition, audacity, and global attention. Meghan Markle's email to Amy Pascal falls into that rare category. It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. A calculated, ambitious, and audacious pitch that stunned Hollywood insiders and quickly became the stuff of whispered conversations in executive suites. Imagine this scenario. Meghan Markle, a woman who has spent her life in the public eye, first as an actress, then as a duchess, now a post-royal global figure, sits down with her team. She drafts a message that, on the surface, seems polite and professional. But underneath, it pulses with ambition. She knows exactly what she wants. The lead role in one of the most iconic franchises in film history, James Bond. It's audacious. Some would call it reckless. Others might call it visionary. Regardless, it's bold. The email reportedly began with an acknowledgement of the franchise's legacy. Meghan demonstrated that she understood the weight of Bond as a character, the sophistication, danger, and charisma required to bring him to life. This wasn't a half-hearted pitch. It was carefully framed, calculated to appeal to Pascal's sense of strategy and respect for the franchise. She positioned herself as someone who could bring fresh energy while honoring tradition, a delicate balance that few outsiders attempt. But the brilliance, and perhaps the hubris, of the email was in its tone. Meghan struck a line between humility and assertiveness. She was not demanding the role outright. She was proposing herself, presenting evidence of her experience, charisma, and ability to attract global attention. She was selling herself not as a royal seeking attention, but as a potential cinematic force capable of carrying a franchise on her shoulders. And in Hollywood, selling yourself is as much art as it is necessity. Insiders described the email as polished, articulate, and carefully curated. It wasn't just words, it was strategy. Meghan understood that in Hollywood, perception matters as much as reality. She framed her ambitions in a way that made it difficult to dismiss her entirely. She highlighted her acting experience, her global influence, and her understanding of the audience. She emphasized professionalism, creativity, and vision. Every sentence was designed to communicate competence, ambition, and cultural relevance. Yet, despite all the strategy, the audacity of the email cannot be overstated. Asking to be James Bond is not a small request. It's not a minor audition or a cameo role. It is one of the most iconic positions in cinema, historically reserved for actors with deep experience, credibility in action films, and the ability to embody a legacy that spans decades. Meghan was essentially attempting to leapfrog decades of Hollywood experience, putting herself directly into a position usually reserved for seasoned actors. And that is precisely what made the email so remarkable and so controversial among insiders. Some executives reportedly leaned back in their chairs, reading the email multiple times, trying to determine whether it was genius or naivety. They debated tone, timing, and alignment with the franchise. Could someone with Meghan's background truly pull it off? Would audiences accept a figure so iconic in other ways stepping into this legendary role? And most importantly, What precedent would this set if Pascal, or the studio, said yes? Hollywood is an ecosystem of carefully balanced influence, and one bold move can send shockwaves that reverberate for years. What makes this email even more fascinating is its subtext. Meghan did not simply ask for a role. She presented herself as a solution, someone who could revitalize the franchise while maintaining its integrity. This is a level of strategic thinking that shows her understanding of both narrative and power. But it is also a double-edged sword. In Hollywood, proposing solutions can be seen as audacious, presumptuous, or even threatening. Pascal, as a gatekeeper, had to weigh ambition against alignment, charisma against credibility, and influence against experience. There's a human element here as well. Meghan, accustomed to public attention and acclaim, may have underestimated the subtle layers of Hollywood politics. The email, as calculated as it was, landed in a world that thrives on indirect negotiation, relationships, and unspoken hierarchies. Unlike royal life, where protocols dictate power, Hollywood's power is informal, relational, and mercurial. A misstep in tone, timing, or positioning can undo even the most meticulously crafted pitch. And Meghan, despite her experience with public scrutiny, was navigating a new ecosystem, a system where rejection is as precise as it is devastating. Insiders report that the email included several key elements designed to appeal to Pascal's sensibilities. Meghan demonstrated awareness of the franchise's legacy, acknowledged Pascal's role as a decision-maker, and positioned herself as both respectful and ambitious. She struck a delicate balance, confident but not arrogant, informed but not presumptuous. It was a tightrope act, and for a moment, insiders wondered whether Pascal might actually consider it seriously. After all, visibility, charisma, and a unique global profile are assets in any blockbuster endeavor. Yet Hollywood is not swayed by audacity alone. It rewards fit, preparation, and strategic alignment. And while Meghan's email was polished, persuasive, and ambitious, it collided with the reality of Pascal's experience, the expectations of the Bond franchise, and the unspoken rules of studio power. It is said that Pascal's eyes scanned the message with a combination of amusement, curiosity, and incredulity. She saw the confidence, but she also saw the gaps: experience in action roles, alignment with franchise tone, and the practicalities of audience acceptance. The email quickly became a source of fascination among Hollywood insiders, even if it remained private for months. Executives debated it behind closed doors, speculated about Meghan's motivations, and assessed the potential fallout of either accepting or rejecting the request. Some considered it a bold marketing move. Others viewed it as audacious overreach. The conversation wasn't just about Meghan. It was about precedent, about messaging, about how Hollywood handles ambitious outsiders with global influence. And here's where the stakes escalated further. Meghan's email was not just a request for a role. It was a probe into the dynamics of Hollywood power. It tested the boundaries of influence, visibility, and authority. By sending it, she challenged Pascal, the studio, and the wider industry to consider someone outside the usual pool of actors for one of cinema's most iconic roles. That audacity alone made the email legendary in Hollywood circles, a story repeated quietly in executive suites and whispered in meetings long after the initial message was sent. What makes this story irresistible, however, is not just the email itself, but what came next. Pascal's reply was precise, unmistakable, and, according to insiders, devastating in its clarity. It was not the polite, vague decline one might expect in such situations. It was a carefully worded, strategic response that communicated authority, judgment, and the full weight of Hollywood reality. For Meghan, it was the first real test of her post-royal ambitions. A moment where ambition collided with gatekeeping in its rawest form. And yet, the email did more than provoke a reply. It ignited speculation, curiosity, and intrigue across Hollywood. Producers debated the risks. Casting directors whispered about feasibility. Media insiders imagined the headlines. And Meghan herself had to grapple with the emotional impact of a response that reminded her that visibility, fame, and pedigree do not always translate into influence. The email became a microcosm of Hollywood itself. ambition measured against reality, strategy tempered by gatekeeping, and audacity tested against decades of experience. But what came next would not just challenge Meghan's ambitions. It would reveal the inner workings of Hollywood power, the precision of Pascal's influence, and the stark contrast between confidence and credibility. And no one could have predicted how the reverberations of a single email would ripple through studios, media outlets, and insider circles for months afterward. When an email arrives in Hollywood, it can be ignored, celebrated, or dissected. But when it lands in Amy Pascal's inbox, it is never ignored. Every word she reads, every sentence she processes, is analyzed through decades of experience, intuition, and strategic thinking. Meghan Markle's request to become the next James Bond was no exception. And what came next? The reply would shake the corridors of MGM and become the stuff of insider legend. Pascal's response, according to multiple Hollywood insiders, was as precise as it was cutting. It was not the polite, vague decline that executives often use to soften rejection. It was a clear, unmistakable statement of reality. Meghan's ambitions, audacious as they were, collided head-on with Pascal's understanding of the industry and the franchise. And Pascal did not mince words. She laid out her assessment with a clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. Insiders described the opening lines of Pascal's reply as brief, almost surgical. She acknowledged Meghan's visibility, her fame, and her influence. She recognized her charisma and her accomplishments, but immediately framed them against the harsh realities of Hollywood and the James Bond franchise. The message was polite on the surface, but unmistakably firm. In essence, Pascal communicated, "Your profile is impressive. Your ambition is noted. But this is not the right fit." What made the email scathing, according to those who have seen excerpts or heard accounts, was the subtext. Pascal's words conveyed an unmistakable understanding of how Hollywood evaluates talent and opportunity. Meghan's public image, royal pedigree, and celebrity status could not substitute for the experience, preparation, and alignment required for a role like James Bond. Pascal's response was a reminder that, in Hollywood, influence is earned, not assumed, even by global icons. Pascal reportedly framed her response in three main areas: franchise alignment, experience, and audience expectation. First, she emphasized the importance of understanding the Bond legacy, not just its cultural significance, but its specific tone, style, and the history of its lead actors. Bond is not just an action hero. He is a symbol, a carefully constructed persona that resonates with audiences across generations. Pascal's point was subtle but clear. Visibility alone cannot replace understanding, nuance, and skill. Second, she addressed experience. Hollywood insiders insist that Pascal highlighted the gap between Meghan's professional background and the demands of a high-octane action franchise. While Meghan has acting experience, Pascal's reply implied that the Bond role requires a different skill set, one honed over years of film work, stunt preparation, and immersion in cinematic storytelling. It was a reminder that, in Hollywood, preparation and credibility are not optional, they are non-negotiable. Third, Pascal's response touched on audience expectations. The Bond franchise is sacred to many fans, and casting decisions carry enormous scrutiny. Pascal reportedly expressed concern over audience reception, signaling that casting someone outside the traditional pool would be a risk, one that could affect the franchise's legacy, box office, and brand. The subtlety of the critique was almost surgical. It framed the rejection not as a personal slight, but as a strategic assessment rooted in risk management. And yet, despite the scathing nature of the response, Pascal maintained a professional tone. There was no mockery, no sarcasm aimed at Meghan personally. Instead, there was authority, precision, and the unmistakable air of a gatekeeper protecting both a franchise and her professional domain. Insiders say this combination of firmness and professionalism is Pascal's trademark, cutting yet controlled, decisive yet calculated. The reaction within Hollywood was immediate. Executives and insiders who became aware of the exchange reportedly leaned into discussions about power, ambition, and audacity. Meghan's request and Pascal's unflinching response became a case study in ambition versus gatekeeping. It was a reminder that no amount of celebrity or public influence can override experience, timing, and strategic alignment. Pascal's scathing response also illuminated a larger truth about Hollywood. It is a world of power, relationships, and control. A single email can shift perceptions, influence decisions, and redefine trajectories. Meghan's bold move had triggered a reaction not merely because of who she was, but because it tested the boundaries of Pascal's authority and the franchise's legacy. Pascal's reply reaffirmed those boundaries with surgical precision, leaving no ambiguity. But there was more beneath the surface. Insiders reveal that Pascal's words, while firm, were also layered with nuance. She acknowledged Meghan's global profile, while simultaneously drawing a clear line between ambition and feasibility. It was a rejection wrapped in recognition, a subtle balance of respect and authority. And this duality, say sources, is what made the response both scathing and unforgettable. What makes Pascal's reply particularly fascinating is how it reflects Hollywood's broader dynamics. It's not just a rejection. It's a lesson in power, strategy, and perception. Hollywood rewards persistence, skill, and alignment with existing systems. It punishes overreach, misalignment, and assumptions that influence alone is sufficient. Meghan's email challenged those norms, and Pascal's response reasserted them with clarity. The human element cannot be ignored. Meghan, despite her experience with public scrutiny and media attention, was reportedly struck by the firmness of Pascal's reply. It was one thing to face criticism in tabloids. It was another to encounter strategic, professional rejection from one of Hollywood's most powerful figures. Insiders suggest that Meghan's team immediately pivoted, assessing damage, reconsidering approach, and debating next steps. The email, brief as it may have been, had already begun to shape narratives within the studio and beyond. Pascal's scathing response also had broader implications for Hollywood perception. The exchange became a point of fascination among insiders, media strategists, and industry observers. It raised questions about celebrity influence, ambition, and the mechanisms of gatekeeping. If a global icon like Meghan could be rejected in such precise terms, what did that say about the nature of power, fame, and opportunity in Hollywood? The story became both a cautionary tale and a source of intrigue. There's also a strategic dimension to consider. By framing her response with clarity, Pascal avoided potential fallout, speculation, or misinterpretation. She communicated authority without aggression, judgment without personal attack, and strategy without drama. That combination is rare, and it underscores why Pascal is regarded as one of the most formidable figures in Hollywood. The email was not just a rejection. It was a demonstration of power, influence, and precision. Yet the story does not end with the email. That moment, short, precise, unforgettable, was only the beginning. What followed would ripple through Hollywood, media coverage, and Meghan's post-royal ambitions. Pascal's response sparked speculation, curiosity, and internal debates. Would Meghan pivot, retreat, or escalate? How would Hollywood perceive her next moves? And what long-term impact would this exchange have on both Meghan and the Bond franchise? Pascal's scathing response serves as a stark reminder that Hollywood is a world of gatekeepers, networks, and strategic control. Ambition, visibility, and fame are not enough to bypass these systems. Meghan's bold move had collided with one of the most experienced, shrewd, and decisive forces in the industry, and the result was unforgettable. And just when you think the story might plateau, insiders hint at a twist. Something that would push Meghan further, challenge Pascal in unexpected ways, and bring even more drama into a narrative already electrified by audacity, rejection, and ambition. Hollywood thrives on gossip. It is the lifeblood of the industry, whispered in private meetings, debated over lunches, and dissected in executive suites. An email, a casting request, a bold move. Anything can spark weeks of speculation and insider chatter. Meghan Markle's audacious pitch to become the next James Bond, followed by Amy Pascal's scathing reply, became a wildfire of discussion behind closed doors. Imagine the scene. Top executives huddled in corner offices, casting directors leaning over desks, producers exchanging whispers over coffee. Meghan's request wasn't just news. It was a phenomenon. Not because she was asking for the role, but because she had dared to challenge the norms of one of Hollywood's most iconic franchises. She had crossed an invisible line, and the consequences were immediate. Insiders say the gossip started quietly. An assistant might have mentioned the unusual request. A producer would relay the exchange to a colleague. Within hours, the story had moved from casual speculation to full-blown discussion. People debated tone, intent, and implications. Was Meghan serious? Was this a publicity stunt? Or was she genuinely attempting to step into a cinematic institution that has been carefully curated for decades? Hollywood insiders were particularly fascinated by Pascal's reply. Known for her precision and authority, Pascal had delivered a rejection that was polite on the surface but unflinchingly clear underneath. Executives whispered about the phrasing, analyzed every sentence, and debated its impact. Some argued that Pascal had been firm but fair. Others suggested the response was strategically ruthless, a reminder to anyone attempting to leverage fame without credentials. The gossip didn't stay confined to the studio. Social media chatter, entertainment blogs, and industry newsletters began hinting at the drama behind the scenes. Headlines speculated about Meghan's ambitions, Pascal's reaction, and the potential fallout for the Bond franchise. It was a reminder of how quickly Hollywood turns private negotiations into public narratives. In this environment, even an internal email can become a story with global reach. Analysts and insiders were also intrigued by the dynamics of power at play. Meghan Markle is a global figure, a woman with international recognition and a unique post-royal platform. Amy Pascal, by contrast, is a gatekeeper with decades of experience, strategic vision, and influence over high-profile projects. The collision of these two forces, ambition versus authority, created a perfect storm for speculation. Who would ultimately shape the narrative? Who had the upper hand? And how would this interaction influence future opportunities for Meghan in Hollywood? Some gossip focused on the audacity of Meghan's request. Asking to play James Bond is unprecedented. Few actors, even seasoned ones, would make such a proposal directly to a studio head. The request was bold, almost theatrical in its ambition. And in Hollywood, ambition is a double-edged sword. It can command attention, open doors, and elevate status, or it can provoke criticism, ridicule, and rejection. Meghan had stepped onto the razor's edge, and everyone in Hollywood was watching closely to see how she would navigate it. Insiders report that casting directors and producers debated the feasibility of the idea in hushed tones. Could Meghan embody the complexity, charisma, and intensity required for Bond? Would audiences accept a post-royal figure in a role traditionally reserved for seasoned action actors? The speculation was not just about talent. It was about perception, risk, and brand management. In Hollywood, audience reaction is paramount, and a misstep can be career-altering. The gossip also explored the subtext of Pascal's reply. Some suggested that the firm response was less about Meghan personally and more about protecting the franchise. Bond has a loyal fan base, decades of history, and a carefully constructed brand identity. Pascal's response reaffirmed that legacy, signaling to Hollywood that ambition must align with tradition and strategic fit. Insiders admired the precision of the reply, noting that it communicated authority without unnecessary drama. But Hollywood chatter is rarely limited to strategy alone. There was also a human element. Meghan's request and Pascal's response sparked discussions about confidence, audacity, and risk-taking. Some insiders praised Meghan for her boldness, suggesting that the email demonstrated a level of self-assuredness few could muster. Others criticized her for overstepping, suggesting that visibility and fame do not substitute for experience, preparation, or understanding industry norms. The divide in opinion only fueled speculation further. Entertainment media quickly picked up on the story, though often with limited details. Headlines teased a Bond email drama or a post-royal Hollywood clash, hinting at tension without providing the full context. The intrigue was amplified by the contrast between Meghan's public image, graceful, ambitious, globally recognized, and the private, calculated world of Hollywood decision-making. The story became a conversation starter, a point of debate, and a source of fascination for insiders and the public alike. The gossip also explored potential ripple effects. How would this interaction influence Meghan's post-royal career trajectory? Would other studios consider her for high-profile roles? Would Pascal's firm rejection deter future ambitions, or motivate Meghan to recalibrate her strategy and push harder? These questions fueled speculation for months, creating an undercurrent of tension within Hollywood circles. Insiders emphasized that Hollywood thrives on narrative. Every email, meeting, and casting decision is part of a larger story, an intricate web of influence, ambition, and perception. Meghan's email and Pascal's reply fit perfectly into this narrative structure. They were not just communications. They were plot points, signaling the collision of celebrity ambition with gatekeeping authority. Gossip spread because the story was inherently dramatic, emotional, and unprecedented. Some observers compared Meghan's move to other audacious Hollywood attempts. History is full of actors who tried to leapfrog experience or challenge the system with bold proposals. Few succeed. Many fail spectacularly. Meghan's email became a modern-day example, a cautionary tale for ambitious outsiders navigating Hollywood's complex ecosystem. And the lesson was clear. Audacity attracts attention, but only preparation, fit, and alignment earn approval. The human drama was heightened by the secrecy surrounding the exchange. Only a handful of insiders initially knew the contents of the email and reply. This scarcity of information fueled curiosity and speculation. Industry professionals debated not only the content but the implications, how it reflected Meghan's strategy, Pascal's authority, and the delicate balance between ambition and gatekeeping. And yet, despite the gossip, something unexpected began to happen. Meghan's email, initially intended as a pitch for a role, became a story about power dynamics, celebrity influence, and the challenges of navigating Hollywood as an outsider. It sparked debate, analysis, and endless speculation. There's a stark difference between the world Meghan Markle left behind and the one she entered. Royal life is scripted, ceremonial, and deeply codified. Every gesture, every statement, every public appearance is scrutinized under a lens polished by centuries of protocol and media attention. In contrast, Hollywood is raw, unpredictable, and often unforgiving, a world where power is informal, influence is fluid, and ambition must constantly be balanced against perception. For Meghan, the transition was more than a career change. It was a collision of identities. Hollywood sees you differently. It doesn't matter if you've commanded the attention of millions as a duchess, or if you've walked red carpets worldwide. The industry measures success and potential in very different terms: talent, credibility, fit, and the ability to navigate a web of relationships and power structures. Meghan's fame and royal pedigree opened doors, yes. But they did not guarantee respect, opportunity, or alignment with high-stakes franchises like James Bond. Pascal's rejection of Meghan's Bond request highlighted this reality starkly. It wasn't just a no, it was a subtle, strategic reminder that visibility alone doesn't translate to Hollywood influence. In the world Meghan had entered, doors open only when ambition, preparation, timing, and perception align. Royals can command attention, but in Hollywood, attention is currency. It must be converted into credibility to yield tangible results. Insiders describe a fascinating tension. Meghan's public persona, carefully curated through years of media appearances, interviews, and advocacy, projected confidence, charisma, and influence. Hollywood, however, operates on a system that rewards not persona alone, but demonstrated capacity within its ecosystem. Pascal's response reflected that distinction. Meghan's visibility impressed, but her experience in action-heavy cinematic roles did not meet the franchise's operational standards. The gap between persona and practical alignment became painfully evident. This tension wasn't unique to Pascal. Across Hollywood, executives, casting directors, and producers debated the implications of Meghan's move. Some admired her audacity. Others criticized her for overestimating the power of fame. In insider circles, the discussion often centered on perception versus preparation. Can global recognition substitute for years of specialized experience? Can charisma outweigh credibility? And in this case, the answer was clearly no. The royal factor played another critical role: scrutiny. Meghan was not entering Hollywood as a private actor seeking a role. She was a global figure whose every move carried media magnification. Every email, reply, and strategic decision would be dissected by journalists, fans, and insiders alike. Pascal's reply, while professional and precise, was amplified by Meghan's visibility. A rejection that might have gone unnoticed for an emerging actor became headline fodder and insider gossip because of Meghan's public persona. Hollywood's reality was harsh, but the spotlight made it even more unforgiving. This clash of worlds also created emotional complexity. Meghan, accustomed to the controlled scrutiny of royal life, may have been unprepared for the informal, strategic ruthlessness of Hollywood gatekeeping. Royalty comes with ceremony, diplomacy, and structured hierarchies. Hollywood relies on relationships, strategic positioning, and unflinching decision-making. To succeed, Meghan would have to reconcile her public persona, poised, dignified, globally admired, with the raw, high-stakes demands of a system that does not automatically respect pedigree or title. Analysts suggest that this disconnect partially explains the boldness of Meghan's email. Having lived in a world where public perception carries immense weight, she may have assumed that visibility and influence could translate directly into opportunity. She likely anticipated curiosity, consideration, and intrigue. Instead, she encountered a system that evaluates fit, alignment, and credibility above all else. Pascal's rejection underscored that even fame must be strategically converted into actionable influence in Hollywood. The royal factor also introduced a psychological dynamic for Hollywood insiders. Meghan's pedigree created an aura of prestige, but also heightened expectations. Some executives reportedly felt that casting her in a role like James Bond would be a double-edged sword. It could attract massive attention, but it also carried risk. Could the audience separate the character from the persona? Would critics judge the performance more harshly because of her profile? The stakes were magnified by her visibility and history. Hollywood's reality, in this case, was unforgiving and complex. Moreover, Meghan's transition from royal to Hollywood aspirant highlighted broader cultural questions. The Bond franchise, iconic and steeped in tradition, is not just about entertainment, it is about legacy. Introducing someone with an unprecedented background forced insiders to consider the intersection of celebrity culture, legacy franchises, and audience expectations. Pascal's response functioned not only as a rejection but also as a strategic defense of the franchise, reinforcing norms while acknowledging the audacity of Meghan's pitch. There's also the interpersonal element. Meghan's global persona commands respect in public forums. But Hollywood evaluates differently. It examines strategy, credibility, and preparation behind closed doors. Pascal's reply demonstrated authority, professionalism, and clarity in a system where every word is measured for implication. The collision of Meghan's royal identity with Pascal's Hollywood authority became a study in contrasts. External admiration versus internal gatekeeping, public perception versus private evaluation. Insiders speculate that this moment was pivotal for Meghan's post-royal ambitions. Hollywood would not yield influence simply because of past visibility or global admiration. To succeed, she would need to adapt, recalibrate strategy, and demonstrate capacity within the system. Her email and Pascal's reply served as